I am on the left side of page 65, so this is page 65. Okay, I'm on the left side. I'm going to go ahead and title my notes domain and range. These are the two words that we're going to be focusing on today. And you can sort of see my pre-quiz through the paper. I think it's okay. So the first thing you're going to do is take your tape. Now, if you don't have tape, pause it, go get a piece of tape. Right? But you're going to tape down this paper that you picked up at the back. I'm just going to put a piece of tape on each side. So once you have this tape down, right, you can continue the video. So this is what's called a mnemonic device, and it's going to help us remember domain and range. So let's start with just the definitions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to color code my notes, and so throughout I'm going to use blue for domain and red for range. It's up to you, right? If you want to do that, that's a great strategy. So blue for domain and red for range. So let's start with what is domain. So this is what the definition is. The domain of a relation, right? We've been talking about relationships between variables. The domain of a relation is the set of all inputs or x coordinates. That's what the domain is. And so this is just a way to remember it. If you just remember Dix-Roy, right, which is sort of silly, but a little bit easier to remember than a sentence like this. This is domain. The I is inputs, and the x is x coordinates. So the domain of a relation is the set of all the inputs or x coordinates. Now, based on that, you may be able to guess that the range of a relation is the set of all the outputs or y coordinates. Okay, I'm going to write that right. The range of a relation is the set of all outputs or y coordinates. And so I'm going to show you some examples. I'm going to show you what I mean. So here are some examples. Okay, and we've seen relationships in a lot of different ways. We've seen graphs and ordered pairs and tables and all sorts of things. So we're going to start with a set of ordered pairs. So here's my ordered pairs. Take a moment, make sure you copy them carefully. Okay, so this is the ordered pairs. Okay, now first, one thing that I want to point out is that I'm going to determine whether or not this is a function. And so I notice, right, I have, I'm going to use blue for domain. Now remember, domain is the x coordinates, right, the inputs. So my domain is, it's basically the set of all of these numbers. So this is my domain. What I'm underlining, that's my domain. Okay, what I'm underlining here, this is my range, the y coordinates. Okay, so one thing that I notice about my x coordinates is that there's a 0 here and there's a 0 here. So that means this input of 0 has an output of 3 and an output of 2. Now we know that an input can't have two outputs. So the first thing we're going to note is this is not a function. Okay, now that's okay. It can still have a domain and range, but we're just going to make a note of that. This relationship between these variables is actually not a function because the input of 0 has two outputs. Okay, so now let's talk about the domain. Okay, now first of all, when we write the domain and range, this is how we write it. And it's there's not a great reason. This is just how it's written in math. You put it in these little squiggly brackets. Okay, and they sort of like parentheses with like a little point in it. Okay, so it looks like that. So when we list the domain, we're going to write a list of numbers, but we put it inside this little squiggly bracket. That's just how it goes. So here's the thing. The domain is all of these numbers, 0, 2, negative 3, 0, 1. But I can't just write it like that, because the way you write it is you have to write it in order from least to greatest. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the domain and I notice 0, 2, negative 3, 0, 1. I notice negative 3 is the smallest because it's negative. So I'm going to do this one first. And what I'll do is when I write the number, so I'll write negative 3, and then I'll just put a little X below it so I know, like, okay, I've already done that one. So, comma. Let's see, what's next? What's the next smallest? Let's see, 0, 1, 2. It looks like 0 is the next one, so I'm going to put 0. Cross this out. Now look, there's another 0. I just crossed it off. I don't repeat. In the domain, I want to know what are all the possible x coordinates, but I don't want repeats, right? If I tell you 0 is an x coordinate, that's done. I don't need to tell you here that there's 2 zeros. Just put it once. And then next one, let's say I have a 1 and a 2 left, so 1 is smaller, followed by the 2. And then I'm going to close my little brackets. Okay, so this is the domain, all the x values. And next is the range. Okay, and that's all the y values. So again, I'm going to use brackets. So the y values, and I'm just going to note 3, 9, 5, 2, 1. I notice that there aren't any negatives, there aren't any zeros. So 1 is my smallest, followed by 2, followed by 3, then 5, then 9. There we go. Okay, this is my domain, my x values, and my range, my y values. Okay, so that's our first example. Notice, right, a couple things to note. The domain and range are in order from least to greatest. Okay, that's one really important note. They're in order from least to greatest. And another thing to note, no repeats. Okay, like when there was actually 2 zeros in the domain, but I didn't repeat it. I just wrote 0 once. Okay, so these are things to remember when we're writing domain and range. I'm going to do one more example over here, and then you're going to have a chance to see some more on the next page. Okay, so let's say instead of being given a set of points, now I'm given a table. And I'm given an XY table like this. And my first is input of 1, output of 1, then input of 2, output of 0. And actually, excuse me, I'm going to erase, and the reason is tables are given in order, same as domain and range. So I'm actually, this point is actually the one that comes first. Negative 3, 1, then 1, 1, and then 2, 0. Okay, so first, let's take a look at this. Input of negative 3, input of 1, input of 2, they each have their own output. Now look, there is a repeat in the outputs, but that's allowed. This input has one output. This input has one output. So this is a function. And let's do the domain and range. Okay, now if you want to pause the video right now and try ahead of me, that's fine, right? I'm going to do the domain and range. And the thing is that the domain is all the x values, right? So the domain is actually here, and the range is right here. And what's interesting about tables is, with regards to the domain, the x values on a table will be listed in order. So this is pretty much done for me. The domain is negative 3, 1, 2. And those are already in order from least to greatest. And now the range I may have to reorder, right? Because the range isn't necessarily in order. It's just matched with input and output. So 0 is actually the smallest thing here, followed by 1. There's another one, but there's no repeats. And I'm done. Okay, ask questions if you have them about these examples. Otherwise, you can go on to the next video.